I'm not here to waste your time, so let's get straight to it. Florida, the Sunshine State, the place millions dream of retiring to, has a problem, a massive one. Right now in 2025, something is broken. Not cracked, not damaged, broken wide open. There are towns in Florida where you can buy a house for less than the cost of a year's rent in Miami. Not a trailer, not a teardown, an actual house. And here's the catch. Nobody wants them. Prices in some areas have crashed more than 60%, and still buyers are walking away. These aren't typos. These aren't scams from overseas. These are real homes in real towns, the same places where families once paid their life savings to chase the Florida dream. Now those same homes sit on the market like unwanted leftovers. Meanwhile, the big cities keep climbing. Miami's condos are still selling for millions. Tampa's market stays hot. Orlando is breaking record. But drive an hour inland into the forgotten towns of Florida, and you'll see a completely different story. Streets filled with for sale signs, insurance companies vanishing overnight, and communities fading into ghost towns. And this isn't just about housing, it's about survival. What's happening in these towns is spreading, like a flood, like a virus, like a storm that never makes landfall but still destroys everything in its path. So if you think spending a little more on a better home makes you safe, think again, because hiding behind that cheap price tag is a fee with a name every Floridian dreads. And trust me, they are not your friends. Now let's dive into the 10 Florida towns where home prices are so low, you'll think it's a scam. Chapter 1, why are these houses so cheap? At first glance, it feels impossible. How can one Florida town have houses under $70,000 while another just a short drive away is breaking records with million-dollar sales? The truth is, it comes down to a mix of three things: location, risk, and trust. Florida's statewide home value hovers close to $400,000. That's the average. But when you move away from the coasts into the rural towns and forgotten corners of the peninsula, that number drops fast. These are the areas where the jobs dried up, industries moved on, or storms left scars that never fully healed. Then comes insurance, the invisible force controlling Florida's housing market. In some of these towns, the annual insurance bill can eat up 10, 15, sometimes even 20% of a home's total value. Imagine buying a house for $65,000 and then being told it'll cost $8,000 a year just to insure it. For many families, that math makes the deal impossible. And that's why the signs are everywhere. For sale, price reduced, owner must sell. It's not that the homes don't exist or that the listings are fake. It's that the costs, the risks, and the uncertainty make buyers run the other way. But here's the thing. This story doesn't stop at the numbers. Each of these towns has its own history, its own scars, and its own reason why prices collapsed. And the first one on our list? A panhandle town that never fully recovered from the most powerful hurricane to ever slam Florida. Number 10, Marianna. Marianna sits deep in the Florida panhandle, far from the beaches and tourist resorts most people picture when they think of the state. On the surface, it should feel safe, 70 miles inland, surrounded by farmland and small-town charm. But in 2018, Hurricane Michael ripped through in Category 5 strength and changed Marianna forever. The damage wasn't just a few broken roofs. Whole neighborhoods were shredded. Trees snapped like matchsticks, schools and churches were flattened, and businesses that had survived for decades never reopened. 7 years later, you can still find blue tarps clinging to rooftops, not as a sign of ongoing repairs, but as proof those repairs never came. The numbers tell the story. Marianna's typical home value sits under $200,000, shockingly low for Florida. That's less than half the state average. But ask around and you'll hear why. Insurance payouts dragged on for years, contractors vanished after collecting deposits, and entire families packed up and left. The local economy, once supported by small businesses and schools, shrank with them. What's left is a housing market that looks like a bargain on paper, but hides a tough reality. Fewer jobs, fewer services, and a lingering storm scar that still defines the town. Investors see cheap property. Locals see the long shadow of Michael. And Marianna is only the beginning. Because if one storm can gut an inland town like this, what does that mean for the places sitting right on Florida's fragile lakeshore? Number 9, Moore Haven. Moore Haven, a tiny town on the edge of Lake Okeechobee, should be a peaceful place. It has canals, sunsets over the water, and that quiet small-town Florida vibe. But look closer, and you'll see why houses here are listed for prices that make outsiders think it must be a trick. In 2019, the typical home here cost well over $160,000. Today, many sell for nearly a third of that. The lake, once the town's biggest advantage, has become its biggest threat. Every heavy rain, every strong storm, the water rises. And when Lake Okeechobee spills over, Moore Haven pays the price, even when the hurricane doesn't make a direct hit. Then there's insurance, or rather the lack of it. One by one, the major carriers pulled out. The few that remain ask for premiums so high they can swallow 10 to 15% of a home's value every single year. Imagine paying $8,000 annually to insure a $60,000 house. For many families, that's like paying rent on something they already own. What's left is a painful paradox. You can buy a home in Moore Haven for the cost of a down payment in Miami. But keeping it? That's the hard part. Locals who've been here for generations feel trapped, unable to sell, unable to move, stuck between the rising lake on one side and rising insurance costs on the other. And Moore Haven isn't alone. Because along the shores of Lake Okeechobee, there are more towns just like it, places where the Florida dream turned into a financial nightmare. The next one was once called the Gem of the St. Johns River, but today it's a case study in how quickly time can strip away prosperity. Number 8, Palatka. Palatka, sitting along the St. Johns River in northeast Florida, was once known as the Gem City, a place where industry thrived, bass fishing tournaments packed the riverfront, and downtown shops stayed busy well into the night. But those days feel distant now, and the real estate market shows it. Back in the mid-2000s, homes here sold for close to $200,000. Today, you can find listings that struggle to break $70,000. Nearly half of the storefronts downtown are empty, and the once busy Palatka Mall has become more of a reminder of what used to be than a sign of growth. The biggest problem? Young people don't stay. College graduates earn their degree and leave, chasing jobs and opportunities somewhere else. What's left behind is an aging population, fewer schools, and shrinking demand for housing. Even the town's paper mill, which once provided thousands of jobs, has scaled back to a fraction of its old size. The result is a housing market that feels frozen in time. Investors from out of state look at Zillow and think they found a gold mine. 3-bedroom homes for under $70,000. But the reality is harsher. It's hard to find tenants with steady income, and crime rates have ticked up as the economy slowed down. Palatka is a town where prices collapse not because of storms or flooding, but because time itself passed it by. And if the Gem City can lose its shine this quickly, what happens to smaller inland towns that don't even have a riverfront to fall back on? Number 7, Avon Park. Avon Park sits in Highlands County, right in the middle of Florida. On paper, it should be a retirement paradise. 8 lakes surround the town, with quiet neighborhoods that once attracted families and snowbirds alike. The welcome sign even calls it the City of Charm. But the reality today tells a different story. The median home price here has fallen to around $70,000. Waterfront houses that once sold for triple that now sit on the market for months, sometimes years. The reason? The lakes that gave Avon Park its charm are fighting a battle no one can ignore. Toxic blue-green algae has been spotted in nearby waterways, turning once clear lakes into warning zones. Signs that read, "Do not touch the water," are enough to scare off anyone thinking about investing their savings here. And just as the environment declined, so did the jobs. The nearby Air Force Range cut hundreds of positions in recent years, taking with them families that kept local schools, shops, and services alive. Enrollment dropped, businesses shuttered, and for sale signs multiplied. For retirees who bought in the 1990s or early 2000s, the collapse has been devastating. Many plan to pass down their lakefront homes to children or sell to fund their golden years. Instead, those same properties now fetch less than half of what they paid. One couple tried listing their home for $150,000 and ended up selling for barely $60,000. A lifetime of savings vanished overnight. Avon Park shows how quickly a charming community can lose its magic when nature and economics both turn against it. And just down the road lies another town once built on sugar and prosperity, a place where, when the industry falters, the entire community bleeds. Number 6, Clewiston. Clewiston, in Hendry County, proudly calls itself America's sweetest town. For decades, this place lived and breathed sugar. The mills, the fields, the workers. It all tied back to one industry that kept the town alive. But when sugar prices slipped and lawsuits started circling around environmental damage, Clewiston's foundation cracked. Back in 2007, the typical home here sold for over $200,000. Today, many sit closer to $70,000 or $80,000. That's not just a dip, that's a free fall. And it happened because Clewiston's economy isn't diversified. When the Sugar Corporation cut jobs, hundreds of families were forced to leave. Schools shrank, storefronts closed, and whole blocks of housing lost their value overnight. The paradox here is striking. On paper, you can own a house for a fraction of the Florida average. But with fewer jobs, rising crime rates, and lawsuits threatening the very industry the town depends on, the risk behind that low price becomes obvious. Locals worry that if Big Sugar takes another hit, Clewiston might not just decline, it could disappear. And yet investors are circling. In the past year, more than a dozen homes have been quietly scooped up by out-of-state buyers, even foreign companies, betting that the town story isn't over. Maybe they see a rebound. Maybe they see cheap land and a chance to cash in later. Whatever the motive, it raises a bigger question. What do they know that we don't? Clewiston is a reminder that a single industry can build a town, and just as quickly, bring it to its knees. And if that sounds bad, wait until you hear about a nearby community where prisons, not sugar, drive the local economy. Number 5, Macclenny. Just 30 miles west of Jacksonville sits Macclenny, a small town that was supposed to boom as the city expanded. On the map, it looked perfect. Affordable homes, space to grow, and close enough to commute. But the growth everyone expected never arrived. Jacksonville built up in every direction, except west. Today, Macclenny's population sits just over 7,000, and instead of becoming a thriving suburb, it's stuck between two worlds. Too far from Jacksonville for an easy commute, and too small to support its own strong economy. The biggest local employers? Correctional facilities. When your economy relies on prisons more than private businesses, property values tell the story. Home prices here average under $80,000, which looks like a dream deal compared to the Florida average. But there's a reason. Hundreds of foreclosures hit the town in just a few years as risky loans and stalled developments collapsed. Banks became reluctant to lend, redlining entire zip codes and leaving buyers with cash as the only option. The result is a housing market that feels locked in place. Homes sell cheap, but few buyers qualify. Streets that should be filled with young families and commuters feel quiet, as if the dream everyone promised simply skipped over this part of the state. Macclenny proves that cheap doesn't always mean opportunity. Sometimes it means being left out of growth entirely. And just down the road in Polk County, another small town tells an even darker story, where the land itself may be the biggest problem of all. Number 4, Fort Meade. Fort Meade in Polk County carries a proud history. Once known as the phosphate capital of the world, this small town built its entire identity around mining. For decades, the industry provided steady jobs and supported nearly every business in the community. But when mining slowed, Fort Meade was left with more than just unemployment. It was left with the toxic legacy of what the mines left behind. Surrounding the town are massive stacks of waste from phosphate production, containing millions of gallons of contaminated water. Environmental groups have sounded alarms for years, pointing to polluted rivers and health risks that come with living near these sites. And while officials debate how to handle it, property values keep falling. The numbers show the decline clearly. In 2018, homes here sold for well over $180,000. Today, many list for less than half that, some as low as $75,000 to $80,000. On paper, it looks like an incredible deal. But ask the locals and they'll tell you, buyers don't just see a house, they see the stigma of living next to an industry's leftovers. Jobs followed the same downward spiral. When Mosaic scaled back its operations, hundreds of positions vanished, and the service businesses depending on those paychecks dried up too. Families moved away, schools lost students, and the town has struggled to reinvent itself ever since. Fort Meade's cheap housing is real, but it comes with baggage that few outsiders want to take on. And as Polk County continues to struggle with balancing growth and environmental cleanup, Fort Meade remains a reminder that sometimes the land itself can be a liability. And speaking of Polk County, just a few miles away lies another town with a name that promised security. But its reality turned out to be something else entirely. Number 3, Frostproof. With a name like Frostproof, you'd think this little Polk County town was untouchable. When it was founded in the early 1900s, the promise was simple. No frost would ever damage the citrus groves here. For decades, the name held true, and the town thrived on oranges and small-town pride. But one brutal freeze in the late 80s proved the name was just wishful thinking. The groves never fully recovered, and neither did Frostproof's economy. Fast forward to today, and you'll see homes selling for around $80,000. Prices that look unbelievable compared to Florida's average. But behind those numbers is a community struggling to stay afloat. Population decline, schools losing enrollment, and businesses closing have all left scars that are harder to fix than broken windows. Crime has ticked upward as poverty deepened, and several high-profile incidents scared away what little tourism the town once had. Even the fire department has struggled with budget cuts, leaving residents worried about safety on top of everything else. For families who've lived here for generations, it's heartbreaking. Properties that once represented stability and pride are now worth a fraction of their old value. Outsiders might see an opportunity, but locals see a slow-motion spiral. Frostproof shows how quickly a promise can turn into a warning. A town that was once built on confidence in the land now carries a name that feels more like irony. And just down the road, another town tells a different story, where prosperity wasn't built on citrus, but on rich soil and farming. Yet today, that soil itself is disappearing. Number 2, Pahokee. On the southeastern shore of Lake Okeechobee lies Pahokee, a town once called the Muck City for its rich, dark soil. That soil built generations of farming wealth, producing sugar cane and vegetables that fed families and funded schools. For decades, Pahokee was a place of pride, sending athletes to the NFL and building a reputation that stretched far beyond its small-town limits. But the story today is very different. The soil that made Pahokee rich has been eroding for decades, and with it, the farming economy that kept the town alive. Jobs have dried up, and young people continue to leave in search of opportunity elsewhere. The housing market reflects that slow collapse. The typical home here now sells for under $200,000, less than half the Florida average. You can find listings for even less, numbers so low they make outsiders suspicious. But these aren't scams. They're the result of an economy that's been hollowed out. Even the town's greatest pride, its high school football program, has been hit. Once a pipeline to college scholarships and NFL rosters, the team now struggles to field full squads as enrollment shrinks. For locals, it's not just about football, it's a symbol of how much has changed. Investors have noticed the prices, and many out-of-state buyers are quietly scooping up properties in bulk. But for the families who've lived here for generations, it feels less like opportunity and more like being pushed out of their own hometown. Pahokee is living proof that a town can sit on the edge of a massive lake with water views that should make property prices skyrocket and still see values collapse when the foundation of its economy disappears. And that brings us to our final stop. A Florida city where the collapse wasn't slow, but sudden. A place where a single storm didn't just damage the community, it nearly erased it. Number 1, Belle Glade. Just 40 miles from the wealth of Palm Beach sits Belle Glade, a town that feels like it belongs to a different world entirely. Its motto once read, "Her soil is her fortune," and for decades that was true. The rich muck soil of the Everglades made Belle Glade a farming powerhouse, feeding the region and providing stable jobs for generations. But that fortune didn't last. As agriculture modernized and jobs were cut, the town's economy began to unravel. Packing plants closed, sugar companies downsized, and families who had relied on steady farm wages found themselves with nothing to fall back on. Poverty rates soared, and unemployment climbed higher than almost anywhere else in the state. The housing market reflects this harsh reality. The typical home in Belle Glade sells for around $80,000 to $90,000, some even less. That's less than a third of Florida's average, and it shocks outsiders who expect Palm Beach wealth to stretch this far inland. But the truth is, demand simply isn't here. Banks hesitate to lend, insurance is expensive, and many buyers with options look elsewhere. For the people who stay, life is tough. Schools struggle with low graduation rates, businesses close as fast as they open, and opportunities for young people are almost non-existent. Many who grow up in Belle Glade leave the moment they can, draining the town of the very energy it needs to recover. And yet, despite all of this, Belle Glade refuses to disappear. Families remain, holding on to their homes, their traditions, and their community, even as outside investors scoop up properties for cash. Belle Glade is living proof that when a home sells for less than half its value, there's always a bigger story behind the price tag. So there you have it, 10 towns across Florida where houses are selling for prices that seem too good to be true. From Marianna in the Panhandle to Belle Glade on the edge of the Everglades, each community shows the same lesson in a different way. Cheap homes come with hidden costs. Sometimes it's nature, hurricanes that rip through and leave scars that never heal, lakes that flood and bring toxic algae instead of tourists. Other times it's economics, factories closing, industries downsizing, or employers leaving and taking thousands of jobs with them. And hanging over it all is the insurance crisis, the hidden bill that can make a $60,000 house feel impossible to afford. The scary part? None of this is isolated. These towns aren't just struggling on their own. They're warning signs for the rest of Florida and maybe for the rest of America. Because when the foundation of small towns collapses, it doesn't take long for the cracks to spread outward. So the question is, are these homes bargains or traps? For some, they'll be opportunities. For others, they'll be financial disasters waiting to happen. What about you? Would you take the gamble on one of these Florida towns if the price was right? Or do you see these houses as cheap for a reason, destined to cost more in the long run than they're worth? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into America's hidden housing stories, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because this list of 10 towns might just be the beginning. The real question is, which town will be next?